All right, I'm going to turn it over to Christos Xenophontos from Rhode Island, who's the acting chair of the Committee on Performance-Based Management. Christos, all yours.
Matt, thank you very much. I see we already broke 100 and we're at 101 attendees. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christos Xenophontos and I'm the acting chair of AASHTO's Committee on Performance-Based Management. Thank you for making time to join us today as Matt is kicking us off on what is going to be a multi-phase effort to collect input from state DOT and relevant AASHTO committees on these very important NPRM on national performance measures for greenhouse gas emissions. So the Committee on Performance-Based Management will be taking the lead on behalf of AASHTO on collecting, analyzing, and synthesizing input from everyone. And we will be working closely in that with the Committee on Environment and Sustainability and the Committee on Planning. I would like to recognize the chairs of those committees, Yasmin Gramian of Pennsylvania and Christina Swallow of Nevada. Paul Dex of Tennessee DOT is the chair of our subcommittee on policy, and he will be working closely with Matt and the rest of us over the next 90 days on this NPRM. Your participation and your comments are critically important. The rule itself might not be complex, but the actions to achieve progress are. So your comments and feedback are, welcome. So we'll encourage you to submit individual state comments to the NPRM once it is published, in addition to providing your feedback here to us. With time being of the essence, as I know in the East Coast, it's already 4 o'clock. I would like to turn it over to Matt, who is going to walk us through the agenda for today and the proposed commenting schedule and provide an initial assessment of the rule for us. Matt, all yours.
All right, thanks, Christos. And I do see that Jim Timon, the executive director for AASHTO, is on. So I need to say, Jim, any opening comments from you? Not to put you on the spot.
No, Matt, you don't. I appreciate the opportunity, but I'm looking forward to the webinar today. This is something I know is very important to our members and really important for us to go through this process. We've committed to utilizing the committee structure to be able to go out and educate our members on the complexities of this NPRM, and then also utilize that committee structure to help us put together a response for the NPRM. So look forward to today's webinar.
Thanks, Jim. So the agenda for today, I have a couple slides, just give a general overview of the NPRM in terms of what's in it, the who, what, when, where, how, why, that kind of thing. Spend a little bit of time talking about the AASHTO commenting process and some resources available to you. Then we'll get into the initial AASHTO, and I want to emphasize sort of Matt Hardy assessment. The information that I'll be presenting is not official AASHTO position. None of these comments could show, some of the comments could show up in our comments, but nothing has been, none of this is official. It has not been blessed or anything like that. It's really just my initial assessment. I've talked about these topics a little bit with the Committee on Environment and Sustainability, as well as the Committee on Performance-Based Management. So some aspects of this have been talked about. I talked about it with committee members on Tuesday. But again, just want to emphasize this does not represent official AASHTO position or anything like that at this point. I do want to talk about an analysis tool that we have put together for the state DOTs to use to sort of better understand how they can impact or how they can affect this GHG performance measure. You might want to call it sort of a sensitivity analysis tool. You'll be able to sort of create scenarios and then better understand, given what the performance measure is, what can you do as a state DOT to affect that performance measure? I was jokingly going to say, I got my PhD in modeling, and when I saw this, I was like, woohoo, get to go back to my roots, my dissertation. So it was kind of fun helping to put this together. Hopefully it'll be useful for members to better understand, again, what can they do to affect the actual tool, the actual performance measure. And then an open discussion, because we have so many people signed up and then instead of having just sort of raise your hand and comments, I do have a set of Mentimeter slides to kind of go through to collect your feedback. Mentimeter are anonymous, so none of the comments are associated with a particular person. There are going to be some open comments where you can just sort of type in your response. If you want to, have a comment associated with yourself, please type in your initials somehow to identify yourself. That way I can reach back out to you for further information. If you want to be completely anonymous, that's fine as well. Again, by default, Mentimeter is anonymous. So let's get into it. And we do have about an hour and a half for today. If we use the whole time, great. If we need to go over a little bit, that's perfectly fine. Or if we want to get out of here early, that's okay too. So an overview. So basic information about this NPRM. I'm sure we can go into more detail about this, but again, 30,000 foot level, sort of macro level, what's going on. So who is this for? It's for the state DOTs and the urbanized areas, sort of MPOs. So those are the entities that are going to have to be establishing targets, analyzing the data, setting the targets, being assessed. Well, really the state DOTs in terms of making significant progress. So what is it? What are we measuring? The technical terms, what's the metric that FHWA has proposed? And it's tailpipe CO2 emissions on the NHS. And it's a function of, so how they're getting at that, how are they calculating that? And I'll go into more detail about this later. It's a function of the gallons of fuel sold, a CO2 factor, and then a ratio of NHS VMT to total VMT. So it's a fairly simple equation that you're going to be using. I would say that the data is available out there, and in the tool that I'll show you, we have it already. You can kind of look at trends for your individual state in terms of what's going on. So it's a fairly straightforward calculation. The complexities come into play when, okay, you as a state DOT or an MPO, what can you do to actually affect the numbers, within that equation? The other key thing is that MPOs have the option or the opportunity to establish their own calculation process. So the measure, the measure or the metric, the performance metric, the gallons of fuel sold times the CO2 factor times that ratio, that's for the state DOTs. MPOs can develop a different function if they want to. So when would you have to do this as proposed in the NPRM? During the next reporting, the 4-year reporting cycle that begins October 1st of 2022. Some of you might say, if the commenting period is open for 90 days, are they going to be able to do that? And the answer is simply no. And that's one of the comment areas, the questions is, given the timing of the when the NPRM is going to be released, and it will be published in the Federal Register tomorrow. I saw that it will be. So tomorrow is when that 90-day shot clock basically starts. The comment period will end October 13th, 2022, if I did my calculations correctly of 90 days. So there is that question of, okay, how do we implement this? Because it's not going to be October 1st. How soon after, once they get it published? How are they going to do this? Well, they're going to require states to establish declining targets or improving performance to achieve net zero emissions by calendar year 2050. And they want to use the existing national performance management framework that all of the states are using and many of the MPOs are using right now. So they're not creating this outside of that framework. I think the states have 4 good years of establishing targets, reporting the data, and everything. So I think it's a framework that's working, and I think their intent is to use that same framework, that same structure for this performance measure. And then why? In the NPRM, they state that the transportation sector is a large producer of greenhouse gas emissions, and they want to drive those down. Again, that net zero emissions by 2050. So that's the basic information in the NPRM. And the NPRM is right here. This is what was published on FHWA's website. It's 90 pages. And then tomorrow, when it gets officially published in the Federal Register, you will see a 3-column version, the more traditional version. Anyway, so that's a quick summary of the who, what, when, why, where sort of thing from this document of 90 pages. So a lot more details, but again, high level, basic information that I hope that I got correct. All right, so basic information. So what is this, the AASHTO commenting process? The first thing that I do want to say is that we do have a Word file that's available that will be sent out. It has been sent out. It's posted to the website that we're going to be using. That Kyla, if you could please post that in the chat, I would really appreciate that. But this is the website right here. If you go to tpm-portal.com, actually I can do that real quick. /GHG NPRM. This is where we're going to post this information plus a lot of the other information that I talk about during this webinar. So, and this is, if you didn't know, this is the Committee on Performance-Based Management's web portal. This is where we have a lot of information about performance-based management, asset management, risk management. So a little bit of plug for the committee of the Committee on Performance-Based Management within AASHTO. Lots of resources for you and your members and the states and everything there. So please check it out. So AASHTO, so within this document, I've identified a number of resources for you as the state DOT. The federal docket, again, this will be populated tomorrow. That link is right here in this Word file. Some resources more about the NPRM itself. So the announcement from FHWA, the what I call the pre-publication version of the NPRM, the nice single column version, easier to copy and paste from. And then two other documents that I think are important to the conversation. One is the 2017 System Performance NPRM that AASHTO did provide comments on. This is the notice of proposed rulemaking that initially proposed the GHG metric and measure that was eventually repealed by the Trump administration that came in 2018. And I'm also providing a link to the regulation that repealed that. So I think these are all critical pieces of information for you as a state to know about and understand. So providing those to you. And then finally, the AASHTO website. On this website, we will provide this type of information so you can easily download it, as well as an opportunity to sort of post comments. So we have a template for you to use if you want to give us comments about the NPRM to consider for the AASHTO comments. It will be password protected so that only state DOTs, members of AASHTO, can get access to that, and any consultants that we might use to help us synthesize results and that sort of thing. But it will be limited. So AASHTO has, this is sort of mirroring a process, if you were around for the original MAP 21 and FAST Act performance management process. This kind of mirrors one that we used for it. And it's basically sort of a two-phase. One is for AASHTO comments to be developed, and then phase two is for individual states to kind of develop their comments. For some of the for the previous NPRMs, some of them had 120-day, much longer commenting time periods. Our intent was to get the AASHTO comments done significantly sooner so that states could kind of address and incorporate those into their more sort of complete comments. Because this is only 90 days, I think we're going to need to use a bulk of that time to develop the AASHTO comments. And in parallel to that, hopefully state DOTs can be developing their comments as well. And I just want to say that AASHTO encourages all states to submit comments as well. We realize, I think, that that not all the states may be in agreement about the AASHTO comments. We're going to figure out what we can say, and then we encourage all the states to sort of submit their own individual comments, and then complement, add on to whatever to the AASHTO comments. But as the Committee on Performance-Based Management, our target is to have 52 or 53 comments in the docket, one for AASHTO and then one for each of our wonderful 52 members. So that's our metric, that's our target that Christos has assigned to me. So please help Matt meet his target if you don't mind. So today we are having our webinar. The Federal Register notice will be issued tomorrow, July 15th, and that is when the shot clock begins. We'll have 90 days to provide our comments. I'm assuming that FHWA is going to have some sort of webinar about the NPRM. They did this for all the other the performance management NPRMs that came out previously, but I don't know for sure. So I'm just putting that in there as a placeholder because they typically do that. Sometimes one webinar might be geared towards the states, the other one might be geared towards the NPOs. I think other AASHTO committees will likely have webinars about this as well. Again, as Christo said, the Committee on Performance-Based Management is the lead committee, and we're going to be supported by the Committee on Environment and Sustainability, as well as the Committee on Planning. But those webinars for the committees have not been identified or established or created yet. We are anticipating, so we have a template that I will show to you in a minute of getting AASHTO member comments about the NPRM. We are hoping to have initial comments from the state DOTs from our members by August 12th of 2022. That doesn't, comments like that in the past were, well, that's only 30 days for our state to develop our comments and get them approved, by our executives and our leadership team. That is not the intent of the initial comment period. This is more sort of informal comments that you might have as a state. They don't have to represent an official state's position on anything or ones that you will be submitting to the docket. It could be anything from, hey, did you notice that October 1st, comes before, when the comment period for the NPRM, ends. There's a conflict there, that sort of thing. So any comments, they can be your official comments, but they don't have to be. We're just looking for initial comments, initial feedback from the member states. So if we have that by August 12th, that would give AASHTO staff, and I'll be the lead AASHTO staff person, Matt Hardy. I'm the Senior Program Director for Planning and Performance Management at AASHTO. I'm sorry if I didn't say that initially. So I'll be the lead staffer developing AASHTO comments. This doesn't mean that we're going to wait until August 13th to start developing comments. We're going to, I've started, thinking about it right now, but that will give us about 2 weeks to kind of, button up AASHTO's comments. We will send that back out to the 3 committees involved, performance management, environment, sustainability, and planning, to get comments about that first draft. We'll give you about, I think, about a week to sort of get us comments back. And then we will develop our second draft. In between that time, we'll be talking with individual states and everything and trying to figure out the art of the possible for what we can say within the AASHTO comments. So by September 21st is when we hope to have the sort of final draft of our comments ready. Again, in between the 9th and the 21st, we'll be sending out, draft versions, version 2, version 3, version 4. But we are going to be narrowing down the pool of people who we're going to be getting comments from. Doesn't mean that we don't want comments from all the states or anything. We're just going to be sort of narrowing it down a little bit, just because we're going to have to get to a final document. And then hopefully by September 21st is when the Committee on Performance-Based Management, as the lead committee, will sort of sign off on it, and then send that up to the AASHTO leadership for them to comment on and sign off on. So that would be ultimately Jim Timon and then Sean Wilson as our president. And then our goal is to have the AASHTO president sign off by October 7th, submit those to the docket, get the information out to the members. And then the final day, if my math is correct, is October 13th is when the comment period will close for the docket. So that's a general overview of the timeline. Again, this document should be available on the TPM, that website that I talked about right now. So you shouldn't have to copy the dates down. And then again, lead committees. So Christos with Committee on Performance-Based Management, Yasmin with Committee on Environment and Sustainability, and then Planning with Christina Swallow. So Kelly Cornell Liu for CES, and then myself for Performance Management and Planning. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the AASHTO staff. We're here to help, and we can hopefully answer any questions that you might have. So that's a quick overview in terms of what's going on with our commenting process. And I have it here as well. Forgot about that. So here's again a date. A summary of a little screen capture of those dates. All right. We are going to have a number of tools and resources for you. I mentioned that website, so tpm-portal.com/GHG-NPRM. We're going to have a commenting template, and I'll bring that up. And then finally, the AASHTO GHG NPRM analysis tool. And I'll go over that later. But the commenting template, just so y'all have an understanding. And I apologize if this is too basic of information, if you just want to get into the commenting, but I want to make sure everybody's on the same page as moving forward. So this is it's a Word file. It's separated into 3 parts, well, 4 parts, I guess. Part 1 is just want to know what state DOT, the name and contact information these comments are coming from. I would prefer to have one set of comments from each state, but I realize that might not be the case given the short time frame and everything. So multiple comments coming from from states is perfectly fine. I've dealt with it in the past. Not a big deal. Part 1 are any overarching comments that you might have as a state. So these aren't specific to any questions or that were asked by FHWA in the NPRM. It's just anything from you as a state DOT. Have you considered this? Here's our position, that sort of thing. So it's just any general comments, and just type them into the Word file. Don't have to use track changes for this version or anything like that. And then part 2, so we've actually gone through the NPRM. There were 2 sections where FHWA had a number of general comments about different aspects of the NPRM. So the first one was about just the overall establishing targets that lead to improved environmental performance. They had 8 general questions about that target setting process. Within this document, as an FYI, the numbers here in parentheses refer to the page number of the PDF version of the file. So here, if you go to page 66, this is where that comment was that I was just showing up here. So page 66 refers to the PDF version, not the 3-column version that's going to come out tomorrow from regulations.gov. That one's, you got to have really good eyesight, I think, to kind of read that one. The other one's designed for people like me with glasses, I feel like. So that was the first area. And then the second general area was about their summary on the regulatory impact analysis. If you read through the NPRM, they had a lot of discussion about this, trying to quantify. They were able to quantify essentially what the costs were, the time of doing the calculations. They had less struggled, I guess, more with what the benefits overall would be. I think that they focused on more of the general sort of indirect benefits as opposed to direct benefits. That's kind of, again, Matt Hardy assessment. But again, that's on the regulatory impact analysis, that cost benefit analysis. I think that all the regulations have to go through. So those were the part 2 of the AASHTO commenting template. So if you have any thoughts or comments about these questions, commenting areas that FHWA has, you're welcome to include comments here. And then finally, in the AASHTO document, I've gone through, so this part 3, all of the proposed regulatory language. So this NPRM focuses in on CFR Part 490, which is the National Performance Management Regulations. It's a new part that was created because of MAP 21. So they are making updates, so they're adding sections and sort of editing existing language to kind of help with logic and flow for different parts of it. So for example, 490.101 talks about definitions. There are currently a host of definitions there. And the proposal for this NPRM is to add these 2 definitions, one on the fuel/FASH, which is a data set, and the second one, a second definition in terms of what do we mean by net zero as used as part of this regulation. So those are 2 definitions. If you have thoughts or comments about them, again, feel free to include them here in the AASHTO template. You can just type them in underneath it. So everything in italics here is proposed language. And as you'll see, there's a line with some other numbered items. Those are comments that FHWA has asked about for each of these sections. And again, for each one of these, you're welcome to provide any sort of general comments from your state DOT perspective as you want. So that's section 101 on definitions. The next area where they have comments is on section 490.105, the establishment of performance targets. So again, everything in italics is new language that's being proposed. And if you scroll down here, there's a line. And then this here are 3 specific questions that they had on various aspects of the proposed language within 490.105. So that's, and again, again, specific language or specific comments that FHWA is looking for comments on, you can provide us with input. That'd be great. Or if you have proposed changes to the proposed language, that would be great as well. And if you just want to use the word redline feature to strike through something and add in some proposed language, that's great as well. We did that in the past. So when we were commenting on other NPRMs, we did sort of a strike through a redline version of what we would like to see in the final language. And we did that. So did that for each of the sections. So .107, the reporting, again, italics is what's proposed in the NPRM. There's a line, and these are the questions that FHWA is asking specific to this section of the regulation. And I forget how many sections there are, but it kind of goes through them all. So this is the AASHTO commenting template. Feel free to download this, provide your comments. You can email it back to me whenever, but we will have some functionality on the website that you can upload these as well. And there were questions previously, and we did this previously, where other states can see other states' comments. So I think the intent is, as a state DOT, you'd be able to, password protected, upload your comments, but you'd also be able to see other state DOT comments as well on the web portal. That way you can kind of see what other states are doing. So anyway, so that's the AASHTO commenting template as an FYI. Let me go back to the presentation. So those are some of the tools and resources, and I'll get to the NPRM analysis tool in a minute. Well, maybe longer than a minute. And I think that was it. So let me just pause there and see if there are any critical or important questions, or any questions about not getting into the NPRM yet, or the technical aspects, just about our process, who's involved, any questions about that initially. And I'll go to the chat and see if there's anything. I don't see anything yet. I might get a drink of water. All right, hearing or seeing nothing. Let me get into the initial AASHTO. Again, Matt Hardy assessment. This is not like official AASHTO policy. So if any friends are on, they're not from a state or whatever, don't go back and tweet. This is what AASHTO said. This is what Matt Hardy has kind of looked at and has jotted down and trying to organize thoughts around at this point. Oh, there's one. So question about MPOs. So these are, when we have webinars like this, I invite everybody to come, join in and listen in. This is really just for the AASHTO comments are just going to represent state DOTs, but that's a good point. In the past, for many of the NPRMs that came out dealing with performance management, we did have a sort of a joint effort with our friends over at the Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations, AMPO. I have not had time to reach out to Bill Caruso yet, but we'll do that. So we have done joint comments sometimes on certain aspects of an NPRM, but I don't know where we'll be with this one. So again, primarily, this is going to be state DOT, AASHTO comments, not really MPO comments, but I'm happy to hear what the MPOs have to say about this. And if we can include something in our comments that support AMPO's position, and we agree with it, we'd love to do that. And then same thing with AMPO if they could support our comments. Oops, let me go to the next slide. So I've do a time check, so 4:30, so I think we're a good spot. I have organized my thoughts around 5 different areas, general areas. One, and I'm going to go through each one of these areas. So the first one is on understanding the equation, just the technical aspects of it. I have an engineering undergrad background, so going through, doing this sort of analytical process and understanding the equation, it was like, like riding a bike, man. It was awesome. Got back on it, and it was kind of cool to understand how the equation worked. Where's the data coming from? So for me, it was a bit, I don't know, in a weird way, kind of exciting. And then we'll get into, and then start thinking about the authority. That was a big aspect. If you read through the NPRM, why does FHWA have the authority to establish this type of performance measure? The third area is the target setting approach, because the target setting approach that they're proposing is, I would say, vastly different from the other performance management areas. The fourth one is, I call it managing expectations, but really it's understanding the sensitivity of the model, of the equation, of the performance metric that they're proposing, and how can the states actually affect that or impact it in some way, and just managing expectations about what can the states do, how can they show and make significant progress, to what extent can they do that. And then the fifth one, which is sort of a collection of other areas, are sort of technical aspects, very much in the weeds, of looking at the equations and just understanding how things are working. But the first one is just to sort of understand the equations. So this is the actual performance metric that's being proposed. So you have tailpipe of CO2 emissions on the NHS in a particular calendar year is a summation of each fuel consumed multiplied by its CO2 factor. You add all those up for your different fuels, and then you multiply that by your NHS VMT to total VMT ratio. So these are your three sort of major variables, or input variables that you're going to have data on, and you might be scratching your head, where's this data going to come from? Do we have it? And the good answer is yes. I mean, this data exists already. It's not like you're going to have to go out and collect it or anything like that. So it already exists. So for good or for bad, it already exists. So the first one is the fuel data. It comes from a table of the Highway Statistics Series, table MF, motor fuels, -21. And so this data exists, right, for multiple calendar years over, we have it in our tool, so you can look at trends since calendar year, I think 2012, but it goes beyond that. So that's the first big one, is gallons of fuel sold in your state. Drives a lot, well, is a big factor in the equation. The second aspect are the CO2 emission factors. And in the NPRM, they actually ask a bunch of, one of the questions is, what CO2 emissions factor should be used? Should it be one from the energy? This one comes from the EIA, the Energy Information Agency, I think, EIA.gov. So they publish CO2 factors, as does EPA. And there are a number of different models like MOOS and GREET that also output CO2 coefficients that could be used. That's one of the questions, is what should that CO2 coefficient be? Because you're going to want it to be consistent with all the states, so that one state's not using one coefficient and another state perhaps using a different coefficient. And then the other big variable data input is VMT, vehicle miles traveled. And that comes again from the Highway Statistics Series, table VM-3. I have a screen capture of it here. And it's, again, it's a ratio. It's a very simple calculation. If you look at this number here, this is the National Highway System, total VMT on the NHS. You divide this number, 31565 for Alabama, divided by 71735 for Alabama, and that's your ratio of NHS VMT to total VMT. So just wanted to use these slides to kind of show this data exists. It's not new. It's been collected for a number of years, so it's readily available to you. But then it gets down into, I mean, for me, so we have these three different factors. The questions that I kind of think to myself is, does this ratio change, right? Does the NHS VMT over the total VMT, does that ratio change over time? Like, do you increase VMT without increasing NHS VMT? Or can you decrease NHS VMT without changing total VMT, or vice versa? So that's one of the questions. And the data that we have coming from, again, the Highway Statistics Series shows that this number is fairly constant. It doesn't really change over time. All right, so the other variable here is fuel consumed, right? And I think this is the big one that, how do you affect this? Because this is the big driver, I would say, of tailpipe CO2 emissions. How do you affect this as a state DOT? And in the model, this tool that we have, the spreadsheet tool, we have various ways that you can create scenarios to say, hey, what happens if the vehicle fleet and the fuel efficiency increases and we use less gas? What happens if we have more EVs and can we use less gas? What if we do mode shifting for commute trips, right? We have more people bike, walk, not drive SOVs. What happens to fuel gallons used? So we have a tool for you to use to try to understand that. And then the CO2 factor, is this a constant? I am not a motor fuels person. I'm not a GHG person. So I don't know if the CO2 factors change over time, or why there would be, EPA has theirs, EIA has theirs, different models create their own. I'm not the technical expert in that area, but it's a question that I have that I'm now interested in. Does this, if we identify one to use now, is it going to change next year or 5 years from now or 10 years from now for some reason? I don't know. It's a question that I have. And if somebody has an answer, that'd be great. You can put it in the chat. So that's the performance metric. So that's what you have to calculate. The actual performance measure that you're going to be used as, are you making significant progress, is just the percent difference between a calendar year and a reference year. So that's all this equation is here. The question that we have is this reference year. Right now in the NPRM, it's listed as calendar year 2021. And there were some questions about that in terms of, okay, if that's your base year, we just came out of COVID, is that the correct year to use? Should we wait for things to kind of smooth out to better understand how travel is going to happen in the future? One of the questions, again, I'm not saying that 2021 is the correct year, the incorrect year. It's just some of the questions that I've heard so far. So that's my sort of analysis of the mathematical equations and some of the questions that I've thought about in my own head. That's the first area. The second area that I wanted to mention is the authority.
Where's it going in the future?
Oh, all right. Don't forget to mute yourselves, everybody. Is the authority. And this was if you look back at the comments that we made back in 2017 to the original NPRM, this is why we were basically opposed to the proposal back in 2017, is that there wasn't clear authority for FHWA to do a greenhouse gas emissions measure. There's a lot of time spent in the NPRM talking about this. And I'm just trying to point out, where. So in section of the code 23 US Code 150, if you look at C2C, it talks about limit performance measures only to those described in this subsection. And then further on, they try to highlight here, it's limited to the performance of the interstate system, performance of the national highway system, excluding the interstate system. And this is where I think FHWA is kind of saying, okay, we can do it, right? Because performance, there's various aspects to performance. One of those could be environmental performance, but we would likely have to limit it to the NHS, because that's where it's very clear in the law saying, hey, it's just the national highway system. So there's concern about the interpretation of the word performance. Does this open it up to other aspects of performance? We don't know. Just some other thoughts. Many would argue, the existing performance measures identified in the rulemaking that look at system operation is a common way of looking at performance. And again, expanding environmental performance, could that open the door for other performance measures as well? For example, accessibility, that sort of thing. So we're not saying it's going to happen. Again, I'm just thinking, in the future, what might this do? And I'm not a lawyer or anything like that, so I'm not probably the best one to kind of talk about this, but again, trying to highlight some of those areas for you. So that's the second area that we're kind of thinking about, kind of looking at the authority. And then the third area is the target setting approach. So within the regulation, within the NPRM, FHWA identifies basically what I would classify or characterize as two aspirational goals that state DOTs need to work towards. One, I would say, is a medium term, which they say a 50 to 52% reduction in CO2 emissions based upon calendar year by 2030, based from 2005 levels. So that's the first one, medium term. And then this long term, they talk about net zero GHG emissions by 2050. And in the target setting discussion, they say, okay, US DOT prescribes that state DOTs have to demonstrate a reduction in GHG emissions, right, improving performance, and they have to align that with those aspirational goals. So this is very different from the current target setting approach for all of the other performance management areas, where state DOTs can set whatever targets they want to. They can be improving, they cannot be improving, they can be staying the same. And various states take various approaches to this. The ones that I use for safety, which are very drastic, is that Florida DOT has a target of 0 for all of their safety performance measures, because they have a TZD goal, and that's what they used. Many other states, look at the data and go, okay, this is what we can get to next year, right? Looking at some sort of analysis, a trend line, or other trying to predict what's going to happen given technology and everything else going on. And I'm not saying one is right or one is wrong. I'm just pointing out that the target setting for the other performance measures are relegated to the state, or are at state DOTs can set those, establish those. So the question becomes, if a declining target is required, what's that goal that you're trying to reach? I have a hard time of trying to figure out this net zero GHG emissions by 2050 is for the entire, sort of economy wide. But how does that apply? How do we translate that to transportation and set a target towards that? Or is it a trend line or what? Again, I don't have a clear vision or a clear picture of that. And then if that is the case, what is a meaningful decline and what will it take to make it matter, right? Is it even reasonable that we can attain it, through this performance measure? And that's where I think the tool that we've developed might come in handy for states to kind of start playing around with, once we understand what the targets are and that sort of thing. So that's area number 3, which is target setting approach. And then the fourth one is just sort of managing expectations in terms of what we can and cannot do. So what impact can the states have on this performance measure? Back in the day when I first started at AASHTO, we had a big, sort of summit on this, and I think it was John Barton coined the term, possession. Well, for us, I think it's been around for a while, but he was the one that said, hey, this should be one of our principles for performance management, is that possession is 9/10 of the law, right? What can we do, right? Set a target or a performance measure that we have some control over and we can move the needle on in some way and show improvement in some way. So that kind of is what comes to mind here. And then, as I said, we're developing this spreadsheet, and to better understand that effect that, again, F8 and the NPRM, they're very clear in saying the target has to show a reduction in GHG performance. And there's a metric and a measure to do that. And then you kind of look at some of the data out there. They use slightly different EPA data, but again, this was my quick back of the envelope calculation on an airplane. So this is GHG emissions for all sectors: agriculture, commercial, industry, electricity, transportation. Clearly, this is 2020 data. Transportation, yes, is the largest, but close behind is electricity, and close behind it is industry. So if you look at the transportation data, this is in terms of the vehicles operating on roadways, things that the local, the NHS, all streets and everything, about 50% of this is represented by passenger cars, medium, heavy duty trucks, that sort of thing. The other 50% is from jet fuel, trains, ports, boats, ships, other aspects that are not, rubber tired vehicles operating on the roadway. So you gotta, in terms of what will be represented by this performance measure, it's about half of the 27%, so 13.5%. Of that 13.5%, which is all roadways, the performance measure is only related to the NHS. So there's that ratio of NHS VMT to total VMT. And if you look at the average data, it's about 55% of the VMT operates on the NHS. That's nationwide. Every state's slightly different, but nationwide, on average, about 55%. So of this 27%, the performance measure that we're looking at represents, by my, again, back of the envelope calculations, need to do some more analysis of this, about 7.5% of the GHG measures here. So again, to me, it's just sort of managing expectations. What can we do, or what can states do to kind of move the needle and have any type of impact on the performance? Because you are going to be assessed. It's a fairly, I would say, simple, making significant progress. If you don't make significant progress, then you're going to have to, write a report or write something that says, how are you going to try to meet it next year? So there are no sort of financial consequences or implications. It's initially just writing that report. All right, so that's the fourth area. And then the fifth area that I get into, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because again, these can get into, and I've talked about some of them, are just some of the technical aspects. So that CO2 factor, which one should they use? I mentioned all these, you know, the EPA moves model, the GREET model, EIA, EPA, you know, other aspects of it, you know, Google, whatever. You know, what should that CO2 factor be? What about the implementation and timing of this? That base year of 2021 as that reference year for the performance measure. What are some of those possible unintended uses or impacts of the measure? One that I've heard since Tuesday when I first talked about this was, you know, there are lots of grant opportunities out there for states to use. Might USDOT, you know, use this performance measure or attaining it in some way as part of that grant application process? We're not saying they are or anything, just trying to think through what could some of those unintended uses or, you know, or impacts be. The consequences I talked about, might they become more strict or more stringent? Because they did, you know, change the target setting approach with this one. Might they be able to change the consequences as well? How do you balance the performance measures, right? Because this is going to be number 18 for the state DOTs to have to report on. But if you look at the simple model that we have, one of the biggest impacts that you can do is to have more EVs on your road, which will reduce the gallons of fuel used. But with, you know, the adoption of EVs, great for the environment, but there are concerns about equity. There are concerns about, you know, not getting vehicles off the road, right? So EVs are just a substitution of the vehicle. Might you still have the congestion impacts? And that's another area that the states have to look at right now is, you know, as part of the PM3 measures is, you know, travel time reliability and, you know, a surrogate for, you know, congestion measures. So a state has to look at all of these things in balance, where individual other people might be looking at them, you know, in isolation. So why didn't you really focus in on this performance measure on GHG? It's like, well, we were also trying to figure out how do we improve safety? How do we improve bridge condition and pavement condition at the same time? And then the other one, I'm not a fuels/FASH data, but I think a person, pointed out that this is based upon data sold in a state or a jurisdiction. So all of the data in that fuels, that MV21 table is all of the fuel sold in the US. You capture everything, but sometimes it could be that fuel is sold perhaps more in one state versus another, depending on taxation and stuff like that. So is this data set, while easily available and it's been around for a while, is it representative for this performance metric, right? Because, you know, again, could some people be crossing state lines to buy fuel because it's cheaper over here, but they're driving their car and everything in this state? So somebody jokingly said, well, if that's the case, then we'll just get rid of gas stations in our state and we'll just sell less gas. And that could actually address the performance metric. Little tongue in cheek. So anyways, but that's, you know, what we're talking about, trying to just go through and understand how the performance measure works and everything. All right. The last thing that I want to talk about before getting to the audience participation with the Mentimeter is this GHG analysis tool that I talked about. We will get this posted to the website as well, so that you can start using it. We're just trying to go through and dot our I's and cross our T's, you know, with this, because we had the first idea for it, I think Thursday or Friday. And I want to thank Bill Robert at Spy Pond Partners, who was able to, using his team, create this for us kind of over the weekend and over the past couple of days. So thank you very much for spending time on this. We have this is another plug, sorry. There's the TPM Technical Service Program, and I think all the state DOTs have received their notices. So please sign up for the TPM Technical Service Program. It allows us to do stuff like this. So that's my one plug. I apologize. So in this tool that you'll be able to use, I mentioned trends, understanding what the trends are for things like VMT or gallons of fuel sold. We have included all that data in here. So you can go in here and kind of select what, which state you are with. So this is Arkansas. So I'm in the great Commonwealth of Virginia. So we can go down to Virginia and kind of understand, okay, over the past, since 2011, what's been going on with fuel cells. So either gallons of gasoline or this thing called special fuel. So we have the two axes here representing gallons of gas sold. So, a lot over here, and then special fuel sold over here. So you can see the trend. Something's going on with the data here that we would have to look at, but again, this comes from the Highway Statistics Series data. And you can, put in, again, from Virginia over here, and you can look at like VMT and kind of see what's going on. So VMT, again, I mentioned that ratio. So right now, NHS VMT is here in this orange, I guess, color, and then total VMT is here in the blue. And the ratio is just the orange over the blue is your ratio. But you can see over time, in general, and again, you got to do some quality control of some of the data here, is generally stayed the same, right? VMT on the NHS has increased, but so, there's been a corresponding percent increase in total VMT as well. And then you had 2020 with COVID, which really, dropped things off. But this is the first aspect of the tool that's hopefully useful for the state DOTs, is just to understand what's going on with those key variables that are inputs into the model. And then the other, you can change these as well. So right now we have VMT, gasoline, special fuels, and then through a calculation, the GHG and then NHS GHG that's been calculated for each of your states. So again, you just go up here and click on whichever state you're from, and then that you can populate it however you want to. That's simple trend analysis to kind of look at and see what's happening. The other one is a little more involved, robust tool. So we have that you can better understand what's going on within your state, and then basically create different scenarios to understand what's going to happen with this performance measure. So again, you can select whichever state you are from. I'm pretty sure these all work. So I live in Virginia, so it has default values for everything. All of these parameters go into the calculation so that you can, if you want to change, again, it's a simple calculation, right? It's just the gallons of fuel sold times that factor times the ratio. But what goes into the gallons of fuel sold? That's the idea here, is that you're going to be changing that through a change in the vehicle fleet mix of cars to trucks to motorcycles. You can also look at journey to work data. So maybe you're going to reduce the percent of work trips driving alone, right? And you're going to reduce or increase carpooling. You will notice that this value here doesn't add up to 100, because the difference is, people that are not using an internal combustion engine to get to work. They could be taking transit, they could be walking, biking, that sort of thing. So right now we don't have an explicit, okay, we're going to increase, biking by 5%. You would have to do that through, less people driving alone. So there's some improvements that we can do to it, but that's what this is how the current tool kind of works. So we include base information, default information, and you can always, change that if you want to. And then the overall composition, the fleet mix. So right now, EV percent of fleet, and that sort of thing. And this data comes, this data here, the default data comes from existing data sources. So the Highway Statistics Series, we know the fuel efficiency of the fleets of vehicles, what percent of EVs are in the fleet, percent of non-EVs using that sort of thing. But you can change that. That's the idea for the tool. So these are your inputs, and then for the outputs, basically that's what's here. So you can understand if you increase things, what's going to happen with my GHG emissions over time. And right now it's the number of years, like, how far out do you want to look? What's your annual VMT growth? Changing the percent work trips driving alone. Again, The idea is that, you know, if you decrease that, then they're going to be either carpooling or taking some other mode like walking, biking, transit. So we want to try to be able to model that in here. If you're going to increase the fuel efficiency of the non-electric vehicles, that's a big aspect of this, right? To reduce gasoline consumption, you can increase the overall fuel efficiency, and maybe you want to increase the current percent EVs in your fleet. So right now it's estimated at 1%. Maybe you do something drastic and you become 15%. So all those inputs combined, and you can kind of see baseline conditions, what a future condition is if I just stay normal with my current trends, and then if you do something to affect it, right? Here's my first scenario. My first scenario is we're going to really, some of this stuff, maybe that stays the same, and all we're going to do is change the percent EV. If I change the percent EV to 15%, then I can reduce my GHG overall emissions, right, to here, and then the NHS emissions over here. So you can kind of see that reduction. But that would require me, again, giving all things staying constant. If I just change EV vehicle fleet mix, that's how I can kind of move the needle. So hopefully that's a quick understanding or overview of how this tool can be used for you, and hopefully show others, what's in the realm of control of the state DOT. As you use it, we are trying to create a small little guide, to kind of help you walk through it. We're in the process of creating that. Just give us some time, but we'll post this very soon to the website so that you can kind of start playing around with it. And please note that we do have over here some comments about where the data is coming from. So all of this default data comes from existing data sources. We are not creating this. This comes from existing data sources. And if you want to override it, that's perfectly fine. You have better sources. All right, so that's the first, I think, part of the major part of the webinar that I was hoping it would take about an hour. There's a lot to say. Again, I apologize for the information dump there, but let me stop. So the next aspect of this is a Mentimeter presentation where I'm going to try to get your feedback off of all of this. I know that some have probably read through it in great detail, others haven't, but I basically have a slide for each aspect of the of what I talked about, like in the NPRM. So let me ask, are there anything in the question, any comments or questions here that I need to address?
Will the tool be posted on the website as well with the PowerPoint and the comments?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I sent an email to SpyPond to do that right before the start of this. I'm not sure if they got it yet, but anyways, yes, it will be posted so that people can see it.
Okay, so the tool will be available on that site.
Absolutely, yes. Yep. Okay. There was one question that was sent to me about the West Virginia versus EPA decision. I'm not a lawyer. I don't want to spend time talking about that or kind of speculating about it. But I have talked with others about it. Again, I'm not the expert in that area, or what might happen because of this, or how does that impact or affect this NPRM. I don't know. That's not my wheelhouse. So I'd rather not get into it today, but do want to acknowledge that, yes, it's out there. I understand it's out there. I think all of AASHTO understands it. It's out there, and discussions will be had about that. Whether or not we mention it in our comments, I just don't know at this point. All right, so let me bring up the Menti presentation. Oops, I'm going to go to the beginning. I'm going to exit the Menti presentation. I'm going to go to the beginning. Now I'm going to present. Here we go. All right, so if you go to menti.com and type in the code 5494335, and I will post that in the chat here, that will allow you to participate. And I do want to have one disclaimer. Given everything else going on, trying to get ready for this webinar, this Mentimeter presentation was developed about an hour and a half ago. So there could be some spelling errors. I apologize. And I tried to do some creative ones. But anyway, so again, none of this has been this has been reviewed by me. So I apologize if there anything in here is wrong or incorrect or misstated. But anyways, so this first one, I try to be a little creative. You'll be able to sort of post where you are, where your feelings are with the GHG NPRM. Try to do sort of, 4 quadrants. So the x-axis here is, are you all in or there's no way, right? And then are you all in, but you think they're going to need to be some changes, or with no changes or significant changes? So the idea is just to kind of see where you are. There's no right answer or anything like that. Just to hopefully just to get a feel for where our members are right now. And I realize this is not scientifically statistical correct or anything, data, so I understand that, but we'll give you a couple minutes. Not a couple, for this one, I'll give you 10 more seconds to kind of see where we are. But if you look at it, I think most people are kind of middle of the road when it comes to no changes or significant changes, and then kind of 50-50 between all in and no way, if you just want to do 4 distinct quadrants. But I'm sure that this is like, shades of gray and everything, just sort of blended and that kind of thing. So that's good. All right, we're up to 64. It's kind of leveling out. But that, again, thanks for giving me the temperature test, kind of, so to say. All right, so we'll go to the next slide here. Oops. And this is should be an open comments, so you can type in whatever you want. Please, again, be nice. Think of it, you're in a kindergarten classroom. You don't want to teach any new words to people. What are your general feelings about the GHG NPRM right now? If you had to, articulate something, not just put a dot, on the, so, all right. And I will say, if you do have a question, if you want to say something, feel free to raise your hand with the Zoom functionality, and I can call on you. So if you do have something to say. All right. And Kyla is going to be my faithful assistant to help me figure out if I'm missing a hand or something like that.
There is a question in the chat, Matt.
All right. Have any efforts been made to quantify how telework opportunities might affect gasoline consumption or VMT? So yes, in that model, that spreadsheet that I showed, right now it's a very simple relationship. Basically, you can decrease the work from home could be represented as a decrease in trips being taken for work. So I didn't get into that. I just don't have time to get into it, I guess, right now. But we do have mode share by commute patterns, commute data down there. And you can put in, we do have work from home as one of those one of those modes of traveling to work, even though it's not really a mode, you're just staying home. But yes, the other thing to note about the commute trips, and we have the thing called the Census Transportation Planning Products Program, is that commute trips only represent 20% of all trips taken. So the idea that we're gonna, again, I think this is one of sort of managing expectations. The idea of work from home is important. I mean, commute trips are important because they happen at the same, it's a critical trip that happens that many people take, and there's a time-space issue of when they happen, where they happen, which is why it's important to understand, and they kind of drive a lot of our models. But in representing overall emissions, it's going to be hard, I would argue, for it to show up and have any meaningful impact. I think that's my concern. All right. We got about, I'm sorry, hopefully y'all have been scrolling through this, and I'm gonna, don't worry, I will take these comments and I will send them out. So I have all your email, hopefully, and send them out just so people have it. So, all right, this is all great information. So some in support, some not in support. We got to tweak it a little bit. So I think the next slide might be, okay, so this one, a little bit different. all the remaining slides are all sort of open comments like the last one. So this one, I put 6 statements on the screen, and just curious where you are. And you can rank each of these independent. So you can say, so the first one, and they kind of go from AASHTO should support this NPRM at the top, AASHTO should oppose the NPRM at the bottom, and then in between. So just trying to figure out where people are, and they're kind of various. So you can rank each one of these independently. So in theory, you could say that AASHTO should support the NPRM, and then also you could say give it a 5 that AASHTO should oppose the NPRM. That wasn't my intent. It was to try to do a slider in terms of where people are and what we should do. So the first one is basically AASHTO should support this NPRM. And just in general, there could be technical comments and that sort of thing, but in general, thumbs up, we're good to go, move forward. And then below that one, AASHTO should support the NPRM, but provide comments on how it could be improved. So the intent, that sort of thing, generally good, but you got to tweak it a little bit. That's what that second one is trying to get at. The third one is, not take necessarily a position in terms of, yes, the GHG measure is good or bad, or we should be doing this, but just provide technical comments, comments of a technical nature, and just letting them know what some of our concerns are, for that. And then, so there's, again, a slight difference because, what I've heard from the states is that there could be some that from a political, I don't want to step into a political mousetrap here or anything. There are some people that thoroughly, yes, we're all in, we got to do this, right? And then there are others that are, no, it's not. And there's some people that are, in between. That's what I'm trying to get at here. So that's that third one. We're not taking a position if it's good or bad, just we're assuming that you're going to be doing this. So here's how you can actually improve it, knowing that you're probably going to be doing this. Should AASHTO propose an alternative GHG performance measure? I saw some of those comments on the previous slide about, hey, it's not going to really matter, right? This measure, the way you're proposing it, it's not going to do anything. So if that's the case, should we propose something different? And then the fifth one, AASHTO should oppose the NPRM because it does not have the authority to require a GHG performance measure. So this is kind of the position that we took 4 or 5 years ago, where we're not talking about the measure itself, independent of what the measure is. It could have been any other measure. It just isn't, you don't have the authority to do that. I've heard states talk about that. And then finally, just oppose the NPRM for whatever reason. So, okay, so we have about 60 people. So we're somewhere in the middle. That's fine. And then the last set of slides are about 10 of them, just so you know, kind of talk about just different aspects of the actual technical aspects of it. So we're kind of getting into the details a little bit. So I'm going to keep on going. So the next one, what do you see as the opportunities with the proposed GHG performance measure? So this one is about the opportunities. Believe it or not, the second one is about the challenges. So this first one is more of the positive. Start off with the positive. And then the next slide, excellent, none, no opportunities. Twice. We need a kind of service where there is people can type in something and then other people can kind of vote on it, vote it up or down. So. So we'll give this just a minute or so. And if any of these questions you have, more lengthy answers or robust answers or whatever, and you want to just send them to me, that's fine as well. So be able to incorporate NEVI and EV goals. I think that's this one over here. That's where we were trying to, in this tool, the spreadsheet tool, we're trying to make it or allow it so that, or enable states be able to kind of do those scenarios. Like if this is a big push, right, NEVI and the EV goals, how can you show that? How can that be represented in the measure? So it shows up that, hey, our state, we've put in all this EV infrastructure. We have all these, all this great stuff. Can that result in this performance, showing improvement on this performance measure? That's what we're trying to do with that spreadsheet tool in some way. or our intent. If we need to, if we got to work on it, let me know. So. All right. So once we hit, I'll give it another few seconds. Yep. And the other one, this came in, and I probably should have mentioned it earlier, the elephant in the room, and we've talked about this with other AASHTO positions, is that state DOTs don't control land use. And if a big part of this is trying to have more compact development where you don't have to drive as much, state DOTs don't have control over that. And I don't know if that's going to be one of the AASHTO comments or not, but it is one that we have written down. I didn't include it in here, but it's, what's in the realm of control of the state. And that's one of the things where, because this is limited to the because of that ratio in that equation, the ratio of NHS VMT to total VMT, if you have more land use control that's going to have more compact development, one theory, one line of thought is that you could reduce the total VMT, but then NHS VMT stays the same. If you do that, that ratio is going to increase, and then your total tailpipe emissions is going to increase as well. So that's one of the things that we're trying to understand, the interaction of what are things within the state DOT control. So one of the comments when I say about, hey, can we propose a different measure? Well, why not just eliminate that ratio of NHS VMT to total VMT? Because then it would be a fuller conversation with all those players that are involved with the VMT discussion in some way. So it could be not just the state DOT, but the state and the locals and that sort of thing, not just the local DOTs. So thank you for that comment. And I probably should have mentioned that earlier. So we have been thinking about that. So hope that was helpful, little discussion point. All right. All good comments as we strolling through. So the next one, what do you see as some of those challenges with the proposed GHG measure? Yep. Kind of mentioned the NHS discussion, that ratio of NHS VMT to total VMT. And I think that's one, if you go back to the authority, sorry, I feel like silence is awkward white space for these calls. Again, if somebody has a comment or a question, you can raise your hand. But if you go back to the authority discussion in that PowerPoint slide, it says, limited, the performance measures are limited to the NHS, interstate, and then national highway system, excluding the NHS. And I think that could be a reason why that ratio is in there, because that limits the authority of FHWA. Again, I'm not a lawyer, so I might be misinterpreting that. Yeah. Challenges, how to move the needle. Year to year, I think this is a good one that we brought up also, is that the type of projects that we're talking about are probably longer term projects, not like 20 years, but 2, 5, 10-year type projects. This performance measure is going to be looked at, I think, over 2 years and then 4 years, every 2 years. So you're not going to see much of a change from one reporting cycle to the next one, from year 1 to year 0 to year 2 to year 4 to year 6. But long term, maybe that makes more sense. And there is a comment section of the NPRM that talks about maybe it does make more sense to set long-term targets. And they specifically mention 8-year and 20-year targets. But that raises a host of other questions as well. So yeah. All right, those are good. I'm just looking at the time. It's 5:16. Got a few more slides here. So I'm gonna keep on moving. I think you can still provide comments if you want to go back within the slide. I think I set it up that way. But we'll take a look at all of these, trying to collect all the good information, and hopefully y'all can see them. All right, so the next area, I think I have five more questions here. So I'm looking at that individual equation, fuel consumed. So there'll be 3: fuel consumed, the CO2 factor, and then the third question after this one will be that ratio of NHS VMT to total VMT. So what comments do you have about the performance metric variable fuel consumed? Again, that's a big one. That's a big part of it.
Now we had another question in the chat about
Oh.
VMT usually viewed as related to economic growth. With economic growth, how realistic to achieve reductions in VMT on NHS?
Yes, thanks, John. Yep, that's a good comment as well. Typically, and that's where we can kind of see the historical VMT data over 20 years or 30 years, that when VMT declined, typically there was some sort of economic impact that made that decline. And I don't think governors want that of states. I don't think mayors want that. So that is a sort of a compounding, issue that we have to, account for. Oh, Deanna. Okay, Deanna. All right. Let me just, I know Christos was going to text me in case something. All right. Don't know. All right, excellent. I'm going to keep on moving here just for sake of 5:30. So what comments do you have again about that CO2 factor, right? That's the second variable. We had gallons of fuel used and then multiplied by the CO2 factor. And I'm not an expert in this, and the idea that there are different CO2 factors that could be used I don't know why that is, but I haven't taken a class in it. So if anybody knows why, I'd love to talk to you just to understand. So this is the one where I'm not sure who said this. If you want to, this is one where you should change it as the vehicle mix changes. Not sure it does. I agree. I don't, again, this isn't my wheelhouse. I'm trying to understand, a gallon of gas burned would produce, in my mind, the same CO2. It doesn't matter how efficient the vehicle is, but maybe there is something that if it's going faster or slower, less CO2 is being produced. I know that's the case from an air quality, some of the other, pollutants coming out of the tailpipe. I'm not trying to prove my ignorance on this, so. All right. So I'm going to keep on, these are all great comments. I'm going to keep on moving here. The next one, talks about that NHS to VMT ratio. And it's look at total VMT as the denominator, NHS VMT as the numerator. And from what the data that I can see is that ratio has generally stayed the same over like modern years. There was, if you look at the data, map 21, there was an opportunity to either add or remove some of the NHS miles, from the network. And that did affect some of the states. So you see sort of for some of them, a quite drastic, increase or decrease in the NHS. And I think it's because of that. The VMT per registered driver. And some, as a different sort of variable, I had mentioned a different equation, from the gallons used. I'm not sure, some people said, well, if we know all the registered vehicles that are in a state, is that a better proxy that could be used to calculate GHG emissions rather than gallons of, fuel consumed or sold? Because then you would have a much cleaner picture in terms of what vehicles there are. You don't exactly know where they are, driving within the state or anything, or, crossing state lines and everything. But All right. I'm gonna keep on moving here. So this is I might bypass this one, or there are a couple other ones that I want to get to. The last two or three, the last two. So this one talks about that calendar year 2021 reference year. Let me just keep it here for a minute in case anybody has any critical comments that they want to put in. But that's what they would say. Okay, this is your base year 2021, and your next target year would be based upon that. So you would have to set a target reducing GHG emissions based upon calendar year 2021. So some of these are saying, oh, use 2019. So I like this one. Can we average past 5 years as a baseline? And then, so there's kind of three schools of thought, maybe averaging it, looking at 2019, or letting things, sort of level out, post pandemic and kind of see what happens. So wait for a couple of years to kind of see. All right. Thanks for that. And then the next one, the authority language. I know this was a big one. I think there were some comments in here talking about the authority. The idea of if they can justify this performance measure, might they justify other performance measures as well in some way? Good comments. All right. All right, I'm gonna keep on moving because it's 5:24. All right. The target setting approach. I think I have one more question after this one. So again, the target setting approach is you have to set a declining target, an improving target, declining GHG emissions. Like it's a little tongue twister sometimes. All right, excellent. Again, just in the interest of time, I'm going to keep on moving here. So I have this one, and I think the next one is two. So two more slides. Any comments about the ability for a state DOT to affect the performance measure?
Do you mean the actual number or with our comments on the rulemaking?
Oh, the actual number. I have other comments. Thank you for that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. I mean, this is the Matt Hardy opinion, reading through it and looking at the tea leaves. They're going to move forward with it. I mean, I think that's the assumption. I mean, I can't imagine them not, honestly. I mean, I've been doing these rulemakings now for 12 years, it seems like, and they've never not done it. Now, they did for some of the, I will say for background for the PM3 rule, they did change some of the performance measures for like the travel time reliability. they changed significantly, and they changed the way they did, they measured significant progress. So I mean, I have seen the measures change in some way, but they have never not done the performance measure. All right. And then the last question here. Just general comments. What are the comments you have regarding the GHG NPRM? Just the collection, anything else to kind of get off your chest in a safe space to let me or us know about. And I'll keep this one open here. So I make sure there's I'm missing anything here, not missing anything here. So I guess in closing, thank you for attending. If you have any questions, again, I'll go back to, let me just go back to one slide here. Oops. So these are the key people that you can contact me. So mhardy@ashto.org. Whoops. I'll put that in the chat. Can't type right now. Hopefully that's correct. Yep, mhardy@ashto.org. Kelly Cornell Liu, KCLEW@ashto.org. With this other guy, Matt Hardy, with the Committee on Planning. Contact us. We are happy to answer questions and everything. Don't forget about the process here. Again, this NPRM is going to be published tomorrow. So if you go to regulations.gov, you will find it. And then these are the dates that we have. These are, I would say, a little bit fluid. We're going to try to stick to them as best we can. We might not. Things might float a little bit. So just bear with us. And then, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Christos, who can close us out. And I will go back to the last slide just so people can see what the comments are.
Matt, thank you very much for really this thorough analysis, and big thank you to Spival Partners for turning that model around so quickly so that at least we have a way to start modeling and seeing what the impact of the NPRM is going to be based on different actions. Great work. Thank you everyone for being here, for your comments. These are very important as you are going through the NPRM with within each state DOT. Please send us your comments as well. Use the tools that Matt is going to be sharing with us through the TPM portal. With that, I know, Jim, thank you very much for your support and for being here. Can I turn it over to you, please, quickly?
Thanks, Christos. Thanks, Matt, for just a great job of walking us through the NPRM and the process that we're going to be using. And again, look forward to a robust discussion here over the next several months here, and making sure that FHWA is fully aware of what the state DOT community thinks about the proposed rulemaking. So thanks again.
Thanks, Jim.
All right. I think we're done.
Yep. So have a wonderful afternoon, everyone. Matt, big thank you again. Great work.
Yeah, welcome.